Good afternoon, folks. This is Steve Barnes at the Times Union. We are here amazingly approaching the third month of everything being shut down, or at least the world as we knew it being shut down. But amazingly, with almost no notice, the governor last week announced that restaurants could reopen for outdoor service, patio service. They did. Remarkably, dozens and dozens were able to get going, if not last Thursday, then over the weekend. There's still another 7 to 8 days, probably next Wednesday or Thursday, the 17th or 18th, that restaurants will be allowed to resume, presumably with significant restrictions, including 50% capacity for their indoor dining. But indoor dining is believed to be starting again just about 2 weeks after outdoor dining was suddenly permitted. We've been talking to restaurateurs, owners, chefs. We talked to a bartender, all sorts of people. Today, we're going to talk to Joe Bonilla, who is the managing partner of Relentless Awareness. It's an Albany communications firm that has a variety of clients, among them many in the hospitality and food and beverage industry. And Joe works, well, it's an apt name for his business. He is relentless in both advocating for his clients and, it seems, going places. Prior to everything stopping, Joe might be on Facebook. You'd see he was in Florida or Puerto Rico or California, places with beaches. Lately, he's been a bit more constrained, but he still does get out and around. And just in the last 4 days, I think he's probably been to 5 restaurant patios. So
at least that.
Well, that's good, because you certainly. I really don't have to drive, because it turns out I could do most everything from home, and I've got a lot of different places around me that are back open. So I try not to get in the car if I can, but you are determined. So out there, tell me about your patio experience. I mean, is this just sort of like, I saw one, it shall remain nameless, but it was 3 tables in an empty parking lot. It was like an art installation for loneliness. What has been your experience?
So, yeah, I've gone to different bars and restaurants in Schenectady and Albany and Troy. And at first, I think there was a lot of excitement for folks to be able to go back to their favorite restaurant, their favorite bar. And my experience was that, it's a slow ease in. There's not throngs of people out there just yet. And really, the restaurateurs are so grateful to see customers come back and they get and see their smiling faces once again. And every single place I've gone to, for example, went to Terra Kitchen in Schenectady, went to Druthers in Schenectady as well, and then last night went to Savoy Tap Room in Albany. Every single place has been doing exactly what they need to do in terms of, keeping with the guidance, keeping with the guidelines, and really ensuring a safe and hospitable dining experience. So it's been great so far.
Great. Now, to transition, 2 days ago, Sunday, 11,000 or more people gathered in Troy, almost all peacefully, to march for hours, to protest, to bring attention to a significant issue in the nation and continue the national conversation about race, about police brutality, particularly directed against people of color. And one of the things that happened in Troy, and then also elsewhere, where they put up boards on windows, which at first were just blank plywood slates. They were just there looking austere, if not menacing, if not closed for business. But then artists came along, creatives came along and decorated them. And we have dozens and dozens that became murals. So tell us about your experience with that, seeing those murals, and then what you and Relentless Awareness and some other groups are hoping to do related to those boards that have become murals.
Sure. I mean, I guess my first thing is that, as we are all moving through this pretty much the end of the first phase of the pandemic, and now we're seeing, because of, protests and, of course, rioters all across the region, seeing businesses and seeing establishments and properties board up, it's heartbreaking, as, there's so many people who are, currently unemployed. There's so much instability in our regional economy. And then now folks are, boarding up. It's at first, it was a shock. But then you started to see, both from the pandemic and now for the Black Lives Matter movement, you've seen artists of all different, talent and variety, taking these, basically these blank plywood boards all across Troy, all across Albany and other communities. And you see that they're expressing how they're feeling in the moment, expressing, moments of grief to moments of pride to just moments of anger. I mean, there's a lot of that's happening right now. And, something I spoke to you, Steve, earlier privately was, this is sort of our American Berlin moment, Berlin Wall moment, where when the Berlin Wall, came down just over 30 years ago, were pieces that were sent across, the world to obviously remember that moment. And right before the pandemic had, stopped all my travel, I was in Washington, D.C., got to go to the museum, and I saw, one of those slabs from Berlin. And in many respects, this is our American version of that in a different way. And there has to be a level of preservation and, of course, exhibition of this art after, of course, these businesses and properties, remove these boards from, their buildings. So, talking internally with my team, we were saying like this is an incredible opportunity for us to, be able to be a clearinghouse for our clients that might have the space to exhibit this art of the moment, but also to work with other organizations such as the Art Center of the Capital Region run by Liz Rice, or the Downtown Albany bid by Georgia Steffens, and talk about, how can we display this art once we're out of this phased in environment right now, and therefore still be able to remember, the passion and the feelings, and of course, what are those actions going to be taking place moving forward.
I also saw in our coverage that we had today, the Hart Cluett Museum was going around and photographing murals in Troy and sending emails to the businesses that they were on, inviting them possibly to donate them. So tell me about those conversations that you have. Obviously, it's really new because they have just been going up in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, not even, and then also the big march on. In Troy was only on Sunday, but
right.
What is the initial inclination? The Art Center has plenty of space, and for years the Art Center did, an outdoor fence show. So I mean, fences and outdoor places, whether it's around Washington Park in Troy or around Monument Square, would be a place. But after then they've been displayed, what do you think could be their future? Where might they stay in some sort of sense of permanence, rather than this summer, oh, remember that weekend, remember those 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge right now. And as you just mentioned, I mean, this happened all in the last 10 to 12 days that these boards went up. You've had artists that have, of course, have worked with this wood and these boards. But the preservation is going to be key. Obviously, as we get into summer and of course the warmer weather months here, those sorts of outdoor displays and exhibitions, of course, will be an opportunity to display this art. But those preservation efforts are going to take time. Just like everything in this moment is going to take time, and it's going to take that necessary insight and research to identify where they can go in terms of a permanent installation somewhere, but also permanent preservation. Because one of the things that is so telling about these boards and this art is, again, you've had folks who might have been artists before the pandemic and they wanted a way to express themselves. I mean, we've seen so many different galleries right now, unfortunately, not able to support the artists that were part of their ecosystem. So this is an opportunity for galleries and those sorts of organizations to come together to be part of this movement in their own way. And so what we're looking at doing, of course, right now, the first step is documenting each of the boards, but then of course looking at what is the next step from there. Where can they be preserved? Where can they be exhibited in a permanent way? So these are things that we're working on, and we're trying to, of course, work fast each day on this, and of course with our collaborating partners, the Art Center and the Downtown Albany bid.
Well, give us an email address. If somebody has seen a mural that they like, they've seen something they think that should be preserved, and especially if they know anything about it, like the artist, or how to get in touch with the artist, because that's part of the documentation too. The preservation is not just look at this board, it's who it was and what they created. But how does somebody get in touch with you?
So you can send us an email to catch@relentlessaware.com. That's catch@relentlessaware.com. If we can't find a purpose for it, we are going to then, of course, forward that to the Art Center to the downtown Albany bit. And if you are an organization that would like to host these boards, we'd be more happy than to share that list of boards and information with them as well. So we want to be a helpful partner here and a resource in this moment.
Have you spoken to any of your clients who actually have the room themselves that they could?
Yes. So one does. I think Vic Christopher at Clark House Hospitality, he's
sure, he's got tons of space.
Right, and he has plenty of space as Clark House is going through, of course, their transformation in terms of being able to account for indoor dining in the near future. They will keep those boards up for an indoor display. That's one example. Right now we're working, of course, with some of our other clients that we can, obviously later in the week we can talk about how they'll be able to do that. But there's a lot of interest in this effort right now to preserve and, of course, display these incredible pieces of art.
Have you spoken to any of the artists themselves? I had a chat with one who was putting one up, as it happens, at Clark House Hospitality. She was a tattoo artist, which meant she was working on a scale much larger than she was ever accustomed to, because it was something like 18 feet wide. And she really, it was important to her to be able to, rather than just helping a client achieve something for their vision, for how they wanted to express themselves, here was her being able to express herself in the moment, related to something that's very current and very much in people's minds, and very much an important conversation the nation is having. So have you chatted with artists, and what have they told you about these murals?
So I've had a couple of conversations with a couple of artists in the last couple of days since I put out a call to action for of course, getting these boards. And again, the number one thing is they wanted to have an opportunity to express themselves. And this was more in Albany versus in Troy. And they wanted to be able to do something where they were able to talk about, the feeling and the anger and everything that they are feeling in the moment on these boards. And yes, they're working, of course, where, before they were working on a canvas, now they're working on this massive plywood canvas in that way. And, the other part of it too, not just the direct artists, but of course the photographers that are out there that we've been talking to a lot about, just making sure, are they, again, we're trying to obviously document everything in the right way and making sure that, if they are taking photos or things like that, that those artists that did do the work are getting the proper credit for that as well.
So from broken windows to moving forward, let's talk about changes that the industry would like to see be made permanent. Outdoor dining, certainly there's, I did see a lobbying group today just put out a call for basically being able to fast track outdoor spaces for all sorts of businesses, not just restaurants, because, if they're controlled by municipalities, there's codes and there's zoning and there's,
right,
as your clients have dealt with related to sidewalk tables, where can we put it and how? And those are often very tightly controlled by the city. And as you and I discussed last week, I think the state liquor authority basically said, if you have control over any space, you can serve booze there. But then you pointed out, yes, but will the municipality allow it? So what are some of the things that have temporarily changed that you think and your clients think would definitely help the industry and the public going forward to be made permanent law?
Sure. So if we go back, obviously, to the beginning of the pandemic, and a lot of the actions that the State Liquor Authority was able to do were really lifelines for the industry. The allowance for, takeout of closed containers to curbside to even delivery and shipping. These are things that we never thought in a million years would take place. There was a bill, there is currently still a bill that would allow for intrastate and interstate shipments of cider. That bill has been sitting, in the assembly languishing for years now. And now there's really an opportunity to kind of break through the logjam of, some of these prohibition era restrictions in allowing us to actually be a progressive state, even more progressive in terms of how we're able to handle alcohol. So, right now it's been proven we've been able to do, delivery of alcohol. We've been able to do, shipping, curbside, and as far as I know, the industry has been very compliant. Our clients have certainly been very compliant in terms of getting everything done. But as we move to this next phase, these are things that if it wasn't for these lifelines, the damage to the restaurant industry, the damage to the bar industry, the damage to the alcohol manufacturing industry would have been so much worse. And so, as right now, there's still, as I mentioned earlier, there's folks who are still maybe not comfortable going out even for outdoor dining, and certainly not for indoor dining. So if we can still have those same privileges moving forward, it's going to be a huge win for the industry. And it also helps support the industry in a meaningful way, until we see a vaccine or of course, better treatment with COVID-19.
Well, have you approached any legislators? Have you been in contact with them and said, hey, how does this seem? Because I know there is one Manhattan Assemblyman who's put forward a bill to continue allowing cocktail and wine takeout for 2 years, but that still is just a temporary thing. What have you heard, if anything, in contact with legislators about how they're feeling on this? I mean, yes, everybody can say, okay, it's fine for now, but as you said, these are 80-year-old laws in some cases, and a terrible, sometimes conflicting patchwork of them that have hampered businesses for years. So what have you heard? Is this likely, do you think?
So any sort of change with ABC law, alcohol beverage control laws, is a fight. So Senator Hoylman and Assemblywoman Pat Fay from here in Albany, they are the ones that have introduced legislation to codify many of these allowances right now. But even still, with of course, having this essentially a pilot program for these allowances, there's still resistance from a number of legislators across the state on this. It's one of those things where, I would encourage folks to, reach out to their local legislators if they really want this to happen, because right now, it's, as there's so many other things happening in the world right now. And one of the things is like, well, we still want, of course, to allow for takeout and delivery and shipping. These things, even though these were, of course, items that support a particular set of industry, there's an ecosystem that is supported through this industry. And so our hope is that, this pilot essentially has been successful. There's been a lot of cooperation by bars and restaurants and manufacturers and distributors. And so if we're able to make this go through, and again, in these continuing days of the legislative session, or even if they come back for a special session, if we're able to get this through, this is a huge win for all of New York State right now.
How could somebody be opposed to continuing takeout cocktails? I mean, I just don't get, if you don't drink, so what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect you. And if somebody's taking it out, almost by definition, it's going to be safer than them sitting at your bar. Because even if you're making them, 2 Manhattans in a quart container that they're going to take home, they're probably not going to sit in their car with a straw and guzzle it down. They're probably taking it home. Or certainly if you're delivering it to them, it's going to their home, which is better than them having 2 or 4 Manhattans and then driving home. And yet bars have been allowed to be open until 4 a.m. in many cases, serving people, and yet you couldn't deliver somebody alcohol at home. Why? How could somebody be opposed to that?
So, it's interesting because I spoke to a Lark Street bar owner, and he said the same thing about, maybe you've had, 2 or 3 margaritas, and that 4th one, you know what, you don't need to drink it here. If you want to continue, to fly at home, take the container, bring it home in a safe way. And, this has been the same challenge that we've seen for alcohol movie theaters in the state. There's 37 states plus, the territory of Guam that allow for alcohol movie theaters.
Oh, those progressives in Guam.
Yes, right. And so there has always been resistance to any sort of changes with, alcohol laws here in New York State. But, even though I say that, there's been a lot of positive that has happened in the last 10 years. And particularly, we've seen, of course, farm licenses for cider and for distillers and for breweries and for meaderies too. And so there's been a lot of things that have been done, but there's still so much more work that is required. And it's a very frustrating argument, right? Because, when I talk to legislators, or if I talk to folks who might be opposed to it, it's like, when I'm explaining this issue, like they're thinking that we're in the saloon era, that God forbid you have a beverage, you'll turn into Yosemite Sam. And that's not the case. We've seen responsible consumption across the state in this time. And this is something where can be meaningful reform in a good way.
I did have somebody explain it to me once, though, that finally made sense. And he said, if our state infrastructure is crumbling and education needs help and all manner of other things, to say nothing of now in the middle of the pandemic and the economic crisis that's happening now with 14 plus 15, maybe even 16% unemployment and a recession that's going to go on for God knows how long. Who wants to waste their political capital on booze?
Well, here's the thing is that when you think about the jobs in the industry, bars, restaurants, drivers for distributors, food suppliers, I mean, everybody in this ecosystem. And then of course, from there, if people are out, having a drink, if they're out having dinner, lunch, whatever, those are all tax dollars that come in that help, of course, support infrastructure, support other initiatives that they may want. So at the end of the day, you may not want to have that beverage, you may not want to go out to eat, but that industry does support you in other ways, from education to infrastructure to whatever it could be. And those tax dollars right now, and we're going to see those numbers come out soon, that impact is going to be profound, because for counties and for localities, that those sales tax figures are going to drop off from a big part by not having a robust restaurant and bar industry. So this is an important thing to keep that industry alive. There's been a number of bars and restaurants that could not sustain themselves through this pandemic. And, if we go through another wave of COVID-19 into the fall, we need to have these safeguards in place to ensure that the industry can survive another hit like this.
Now, if we're lucky, if the numbers stay good, could be as soon as next Wednesday that you're back in a dining room.
Yeah.
First 3 places you want to sit in a dining room.
Oof. See, these are the difficult questions, Steve, right?
You can give me a lobbying pitch all day.
Oh, boy.
But where do you want to sit in a dining room?
One, of course, is I would love to go to Donna's Italian over in Troy, because obviously with Peck's Arcade no longer, that'd be one. Here in Albany, I would love to go to Prime. It's one of those places where I haven't been able to go even before this, and I would love to just be able to go inside. And then the third one, and
wait,
again,
you've never been to 677 Prime?
No, of course I have, but I haven't been there in a while. So, but the one that, and again, not to give Jamie Ortiz too much credit, but I would love to go back to Toro Cantina inside. Yes. It's a beautiful place right in Colonnade. So, those would be the least of 3. But of course, as folks who follow me on social media, I go to a whole host of places in the region. I want to give my dollars where I love, right? But one of the things I would tell folks is, if you're going to go out, make sure that you're tipping those bartenders, make sure you're tipping those servers, the right way. They've been suffering hard. And again, if you're not willing to give, 20 to 30% for a tip, you might as well just continue to do takeout right now. That's my personal opinion.
I said that last week, and most people agreed. A vast amount of people agreed. And I had a couple of cranks. One who was like, "Shame on you for putting your hand in my wallet." I was like, "I didn't put my hand in your wallet. I made a suggestion." And somebody else said, "Well, we're going to stay home, so the restaurant owners are going to be mad at you that we stayed home because you told us we had to tip too much." And I said, well, if you look at the responses, there's more than 150 reactions to my comment, "Stay the hell home if you can't tip at least 25%.
Right.
And 80% of them were from people in the industry. So I know in this case, and the difference, first of all, nobody's really spending $100 on takeout now.
No.
Well, unless you're going to Prime. But second, and so the difference on a $50 check between 20 and 25% is absolutely negligible to you.
It's nothing.
And it makes a difference to the server, because if every single person gave him an extra $5 over the course of a day, all of a sudden they're getting back to some of what they might have been making beforehand, because that's a big difference. Servers that were in restaurants where all their tips were declared were making the top unemployment payments. So they're getting $1,100 and some dollars a week.
Right.
Asking them to come home, the server I talked to last week was basically, she expected in the first week back to make 50% of what she was making on unemployment, but she wanted to come back because she'd worked at the place for 5 years since it opened. It was important to her to come back, and frankly, she wanted to work. She was going crazy. As much as she loved her dog, she was going crazy at home, and she came back taking a 50% pay cut. So if I can give 25 or 30% or an extra $5 to that person, I'm doing it.
No, and that's why I was doing during even takeout. I was like, I might give that bigger tip because I'm not going back out to the bar every night or every other night. So I'm going to give my way in that way. And it's the same thing right now, even going to the places I've gone to for outdoor dining, and even for next week for indoor dining, I'm going to give my way because I want to make sure that those folks are taken care of. And then, of course, to support the restaurants and those bars that I love.
And they're also running around in masks, which you're not.
Yes.
You get to
Right.
sit down, and if you're inside running from a hot kitchen through a dining room and a hallway and then outside,
You deserve it. You deserve that extra.
All
Right.
righty. Very good then. On that rousing note, folks, this is Steve Barnes from the Times Union saying goodbye to Joe Bonilla of Relentless Awareness. He keeps us up to date on what's going on, advocating for his clients, and also being a bon vivant on his own, visiting as many places as he can, certainly more than I have in recent weeks. I will be back next week to chat more with you starting at 1 p.m. on Tuesday. And until then, goodbye, Joe, and
Thanks, Steve.
goodbye to our viewers.